What is going on, alpha males? Welcome to Alpha Male Podcast, where we talk about what it means to be a man the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, made in His image, strong, dominant, and in control. And we don't apologize for that. I'm going to skip over the normal bio and probably put it in at the end, because today I want to talk about basic preparedness. The basics, the fundamentals, the foundation. I'm not talking about, doomsday preppers, bunkers in Wyoming. I'm talking about basics. I'm going to forego the bio because most of my adult life has been spent as a professional gunfighter, whether that's military, specialized law enforcement, private contractor, and that really doesn't have a lot to do other than preparedness is generally a part of that and a part of my life. So I'd like to get into the topic. Before I do, if this is not the first time you've listened, I hope that you will scroll down, especially if you're listening on Spotify. Scroll down and hit some stars. Not everybody, it appears, likes the message. Especially, I know it can be controversial that men and women are different and men should be strong and dominant and in control. That's not super popular. And that's okay if somebody genuinely doesn't like the podcast and gives it a bad rating. But if you like it, hopefully you'll scroll down and give it a good rating, an honest one that you think it deserves. So with that, let's get into the day's topic. I hope that you would concede as a starting point that it's part of a man's job to provide and protect. And it's part of an alpha male's job to provide and protect those weaker than them. Widows, orphans, that's a command from God. The people under your stewardship, wives, children. Hopefully we can start from that. Blessings are meant to be shared. If you are blessed to be a strong, dominant man, that is to help others, not to help just yourself. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. That denotes that you love yourself and can take care of yourself, but also I think that you should be able to provide and protect for those around you. And there's a duality in that. Provide and protect. You should be able to defend your family, but if you can't feed them and they're starving to death, that's a problem. If you can feed your family, you've got 100 years worth of food saved up. But somebody wants to come in and physically do harm to your family, yourself, your loved ones, and you can't protect them, that's a problem. So hopefully we'll address both those things today. And again, remember, this is the basics. If you're more advanced than this, hopefully you still glean from this, and if not, maybe you'll share it with somebody who is not. Now, the first thing I'm going to tell you, you might think that's easy. I'm going to say, that's good. It should be. You're getting started. It's like if I was talking to you about fitness, which that episode may come out before this. For the average Joe getting into fitness, I'm like, okay, here's what you need to do tonight. Go out and run a marathon. Like, right? That's not where you start. And no, it's not buy more toilet paper. Oh, the toilet paper of whatever that was, 2020. No, let's tell you to start with water. Now, water may not be free. You may not get water for free, especially if you have an electric pump. Even then, it wouldn't be free because you have to pay for the electricity. But very, very low cost for most people. A penny or something, a couple of cents a gallon, maybe. Water. Water is important. What do you do if you go to your tap and clean water or any water, no water comes out of that tap? What do you do in that scenario when no water comes out of the tap? And there's no water at the store either. Are you going to be sitting there as an alpha male sucking your thumb waiting for somebody to come bail you out? Or are you going to be able to provide water for yourself and for those around you? The easiest way to do that is to store clean water now for very inexpensive. You don't need a giant stock tank. You don't need 55-gallon barrels full of water. Again, this is a beginning thing. A lot of people drink soda. I would advise not drinking soda, but a lot of people do. Those containers are a good place to house clean water. Rinse them out, fill them with clean water, and put them in spare areas. The reason I say soda is a lot of times water, like when you buy a gallon of water, it's not in the most robust container, because soda, or pop, I guess if you're from wherever people say pop from, it's under pressure and it's acidic, so it comes in a more robust container. So rinse that stuff out of there and fill it with water. Just whatever comes out of your tap now that's supposedly clean. Put a top on it, a cap on it. Put it in a place out of the way that you're not using that you can store water. A closet, a dresser, under the bed. This is not hard. This is not rocket science. If you get the containers for free, I mean, they're probably not free, but if you bought them already and you're just throwing them away, why not fill them with good clean water and store them until you have enough? What's enough? That's up to you. But whatever you're storing is going to be more than you had before. Why not just keep at it until you have filled up spaces that you're not using anyway? In the corners of your pantry, for instance, or under the passenger seat of your car. If it's like a 2-liter bottle or the smaller bottles of soda, why not fill that with water and put them under the passenger seat of your car, assuming there's not a first aid kit or something back there, right? It's easier to have clean water. Also, you should have a way to purify water. I was talking to a brother that I dearly love years ago, talking about, and this was during a time when we were on a tactical team together, and we were in a city that was undergoing civil unrest. It was not an abstract thought to think, what if things get really bad? Because they were getting that way quick. Like, how are you going to get clean water? And he's like, oh, I'll boil water. Now, we're in the desert Southwest, not the Pacific Northwest. Oh, I'll boil water. And I was like, okay. And granted, he probably lived in a subdivision or the suburbs. Okay, what are you going to boil water with? And that, he knew that you could purify water by boiling it. If you've ever boiled a large container of water, you'll know that it takes a massive amount of energy. I spend time, at times, living off-grid. It's a lot of work to gather wood and boil water. If you already heat your house with a wood stove or something like that, or you have several cords of wood stacked up, that's great. It's probably not that hard if you can get water to boil water. Keep in mind that'll generally take out contaminants, biological contaminants, bacteria and stuff, but it might not do much if there's another kind of contaminant in the water, petroleum byproduct or something else. It doesn't get everything out of the water, so keep that in mind. You got to think a little bit more ahead than, oh, I'll just boil water, because that requires a massive amount of energy. What are you boiling it with? Are you cutting down the trees in your backyard? Because you may not know this, but if you've never lived sustaining with firewood, if it's like a live tree, in general, you'll cut that down and what's called season the wood 6 months, a year before you burn it, because it's wet. So if you think, oh, I'm going to boil water, you better have a way to store up energy to boil water. Maybe that's a propane grill outside. Then make sure you have extra propane stored up to boil that water. Other ways, Life Straw. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Life Straw. I've used them for a while. I like the Sawyer Minis better. They're smaller. In my experience, they go longer without clogging. They're easy to use. They will generally have the threads that screw onto a lot of common water bottles. I'd say Sawyer Minis are great. They're not that expensive. Also, you might want to be acquainted with how to make a filter on your own. I mean just a thought experiment. I mean actually do it before you need it. But let's back off from that. This is basic. So store clean water and then have a basic water filter that requires little energy input. Unless you already have like a wood stove, and boiling water is pretty easy. And you can acquire said water. Because remember, if there's no power and you're on like a well pump, even if you're on a well, you have to run that well pump, which requires quite a bit of energy. So you got to think about that. Maybe you have an artesian well, maybe you have a fresh spring nearby that a bunch of people aren't going to be using to go to the bathroom in and, you know, brush your teeth in and stuff like that if there's a big massive event. Because that's the thing, dirty water kills a lot of people in third world countries and after disasters. So clean water, keep it basic. We're going to move on from clean water. Next, food. In that order, right? Water and then food. Because if you can't get water, you probably shouldn't be eating. Because digestion requires even more water. Food. And I'm going to give two aspects of this. You should store some food. A very low ROI as far as energy goes. Because when you talk about biological survival, you can boil it down to a game of math. Calories expended versus calories put in. So the easiest and best way, if things get bad in a crisis, is to have calories on hand. Again, this is basic. I'm going to submit one of the most basic things to do is not go buy a pallet of Mountain House or MREs that you probably won't eat and don't eat. Just look at what you already eat that stores well. What do you already eat that stores well? I would first prioritize things that don't take a lot of energy. For instance, rice. Rice in a bag is not bad, but you have to cook it. You have to boil it. And remember what I said, like if there's no power, how are you going to boil that rice? Maybe you have natural gas and there's pressure and you still are connected to a natural gas line. Perhaps that's a viable option. However, you got to think about that. A bag of dried beans and rice requires a lot more energy to prepare than, let's say, a can of Denti Moore beef stew. I'm not saying not to store beans and rice, but I'm saying if you're looking at getting started, what do you and your family eat that has a pretty long shelf life that you can store? And there's a lot of things like that. For instance, I like sardines. They're especially sardines in oil. They're high in calories, they're high in good fat, they're high in protein. They store a really long time and they require no preparation. I can open them up and eat them with my hands. That's an example for me. Whatever it is for you. Maybe you like cans of chili. Maybe you like Denti Moore beef stew. Another really good one is peanut butter. I mean, who doesn't like peanut butter? I'm not saying you can't be an alpha male and not like peanut butter, but, I mean, peanut butter is pretty alpha male in my opinion. Anyway, peanut butter, jokes aside, it's really calorie dense. It's got a lot of fat, a lot of protein. It's calorie dense. You don't have to prepare it. You can literally open the jar and eat it with your hands. Don't want to sanitize them if you're in a nasty environment. You can literally break a stick off a tree and eat the peanut butter. It's also a great bug out option, which we'll get to like a bug out thing later. But you don't need all kinds of fancy jet boil stove and all that fancy infrastructure, right? You can just have a jar of peanut butter. You can probably find something to eat it with. It's calorie dense. If you like peanut butter, then that's a bonus, right? And you probably eat it anyway. So store some of that. And this is level 1. And that's also a great thing for, again, if you have to go mobile. Have to leave real quick and go mobile, you might want to grab what's most calorie dense. And that peanut butter is a good one. Also, real basic things, protein bars if you eat those. Some store better than others, but assuming it stores well, protein bars are a good thing. Trail mix is an obvious answer. It's, called trail mix because it's good for the trail. It can just be eaten out of a bag. Again, very low calorie input to get those calories. You just reach your hand in and bring it to your face. That's pretty low calorie output for a lot of calorie input. It's calorie dense. So trail mix it should store for a long time, assuming you like it. And I'm not going to give you 100 different examples, but you get the idea, hopefully. You can glean from that what you should store. The other part of this is being able to acquire food in some way. If you've listened for any length of time, you'll know that I'm big into hunting and fishing and foraging. You don't have to be into all that, right? You don't have to be able to go out and set snares and catch animals, which is something I've done and done professionally. It requires a lot. It's a thinking man's game, trapping. So forget whatever you might have seen on some video or something where somebody just like, put snare wire in your pack and you can feed yourself. There's a lot that goes into that, knowing when and where that animal is going to step into that several small inches of area. That could be the way that you choose, but choose a way. This is beginning. I don't care if that's fishing for you. If you already are acquainted with fishing, I'm not talking about in a bass boat with a bunch of lures, which I also love to do for recreation. I'm talking about fishing simply for survival. So that might be the way that you pick. If you live in Florida, that might be a really good option. Or somewhere with a lot of water. Let's say, Minnesota. Simple things like jug fishing, trot lines, having a substantial amount of hooks on hand, because hooks are one of those things, yeah, you can make them, but it takes a lot of energy, and you're probably not making a hook nearly as good as you can get right now really cheaply at Walmart or Bass Pro Shop or whatever. So have some hooks on hand, have some fishing line on hand, and probably in whatever environment you're in, find something for bait. But that's something you have to practice now. Don't just assume. But pick a way, and I just picked fishing because it probably turns the least amount of people off. Not everybody in the subdivision is going to go out and shoot a deer. But most people, I think if they're serious about this, would be willing to go out and try to catch fish. And literally figure out that pretty easily. Again, fishing line and hooks, you can tie it to a literal stick or a piece of bamboo. People did it for a long time with probably worse hooks and worse line than you can get in store now. Something so easy as, little tiny pieces of hot dogs or little tiny pieces of cheese or little pieces of stale bread. All that stuff we'll catch, and I have caught fish on. Foraging. What plants in your area can you eat, and what plants in your area can kill you? Because there's both sides of that spectrum. A lot of things that look really delicious will straight up kill you. And some things that look really gross are actually quite delicious and very nutritious. So being able to forage in your area. You don't have to be a master forager, but maybe know some things that are available in certain seasons. So at least in every season, you know a few things you can eat. Blackberries, cattails, lamb's quarter. And I'm just naming off some common ones. And don't just be like, oh yeah, cattails, I know those are around here, I can eat those, I'm good. You actually have to do it. You can't just bend over and start chewing on cattails. There are certain parts that you can eat and certain parts and ways you have to prepare them. Learn that by trial and error. So again, have a way. Pick one. More than one is better, but having a way to procure calories and know stealing from others is not a legitimate way. That's a good way to get shot in the face. Have a legit way to obtain calories. Because you may find yourself in a situation where you've run out of food or where you have to leave in such a hurry that you don't have any. Or somebody steals your food. Which brings me to another point. Protection. Remember I said provide for, which is hitherto for what we've talked about. And how about protection? Now I'm going to come at this as an American in America with the Second Amendment. But you can extrapolate different things and apply different principles if you're, let's say, in France. I'd say part of being a good man is being able to protect, which denotes at times being dangerous to those who mean to do harm and do evil. And I would submit, if you're a man, then you are armed. Fists and feet are a weapon, especially if you know how to use them properly. Also, your skull plate, right, the front of your head, your teeth, those can be weapons. Many people from early in human history to today are killed with hands and feet and teeth. As you might imagine from my background, if you've listened to the Bible before, I can kill somebody pretty quickly with just my hands. My feet have to get me there first, so cardio is a pretty good thing. But you get the idea. Like you should be armed and dangerous all the time. Even if you have nothing, even if you are naked, you should be able to defend. That's part of being a man. However, there's more efficient ways to project force. And whatever tool it is, realize that should be the goal. To project force to stop evil. I don't care if it's a toothpick or a 115 howitzer or a drone. They should be used as a way to project and or multiply force to fight evil, to stop evil. I would submit that's really the only legitimate use for a weapon or a use of force tool. I would submit every man, armed or not, should again be able to have some experience with hand-to-hand combat. Again, basic stuff. how to wrestle, how to throw punches and kicks. You don't have to be Bruce Lee or Mike Tyson, but I would say know something more than nothing. Be acquainted with physical force. Also, if you've listened for any length of time, you'll know I'm big on carrying a knife. I think as a man, you should carry a knife. And it doesn't even have to be for use of force. It is a good utilitarian tool that men, again, have used since early on in human history till today. Hopefully you never need it for defense. Carry a knife for a lot of things. From food procurement to food preparation to a basic tool. As you probably know, I'm in favor of guns. I do a whole other podcast called Gunfighter Life. However, if I'm being honest, in some kind of preparedness situation, disaster, survival scenario, you're probably far more likely to use a knife. And a knife can be a way to project force, multiply force. But it can also be a lot of other things. A very useful, maybe the most useful, like handheld metal tool. You make a lot of other stuff with a knife. And as much as I like and enjoy guns, they're probably a lot less broad spectrum. They have a narrow spectrum of usefulness. So I'm going to say, get a knife. A good knife. Now, most people aren't going to carry a fixed blade knife day to day. And I would say part of this is having it on you. I don't know knife laws in a lot of other countries and stuff, but I would assume you can have a folding knife in your pocket in a lot of places. Have a good, usable folding knife, and for me, I'm going to specify like between 3 and 5 inches. Anywhere in there is a good, all-around useful knife. A drop point or a clip point blade. There's a lot of other blade styles, tontos and stuff, but you're getting more narrow spectrum as opposed to broad spectrum. A drop point, a clip point blade, 3 to 5 inch knife. I'm going to recommend what I've recommended so many times in the past, a Buck 110 Slim. That can be something else, right? It could be a CRKT M16 or probably literally hundreds of other designs. But if you just want to start with one, the Buck 110 Slim, their basic model is not very expensive. It's a great utilitarian tool. Now, I don't want it in a defensive encounter over a gun, but it certainly could be used for defense. It also could butcher an entire elk if I need to. It's a good all-around knife, and it's not overly expensive. So that will be my choice, but you could choose a neck knife, you could choose a fixed blade, really whatever it is, but I would say have one on you and get in the good habit of carrying a knife on you when you are awake. Next, if you can up your armament to a firearm. Now, I plan on doing a whole other one, God willing, on like Average Joe CCW, carrying a firearm for defense, or a small battery of firearms for basic situations. So I'm going to kind of do a glossary, quick flyover of it here. Consider being armed, and being armed most of the time in most places that's legal and socially acceptable means a concealed carry handgun. I do a whole other podcast going over the minutia of Glock versus Smith & Wesson and all the little small details. But pick one and train with it. Again, I'm planning on doing an Average Joe's thing for that, about people getting into it. But really look at that. And before or after that, depending on legislation and lifestyle and where you live, you may really consider a shotgun. It is the most broad spectrum of firearms as far as usefulness. It's great for defense, it's great for home defense, it's great for urban operations, it's great for putting food on the table. Hopefully you never need your firearm for a defensive encounter. If you need to procure food, which most of us, by God's grace, eat every day, it's the best firearm, in my opinion, to procure food. Anything from a mourning dove to a moose. Right? You can put it down with a simple 12 gauge or even 20 gauge for that matter shotgun. For rate of fire and basic utility, I would say a pump. If you don't care about rate of fire, a good single shot can be had very affordably. And I've done many episodes on survival shotguns, so maybe check one of those out. But that's all I'm going to touch on for that. This is a basic preparedness thing. It's just not legal for you to have a handgun on you and carry one on you, maybe consider having that shotgun and keeping it close at hand with an assortment of different ammunition, because that's what makes the shotgun so versatile. Now you may be thinking, what about the bug out bag? He hasn't said anything about a bug out bag. Well, this is, by God's grace, there'll be a whole other episode on Average Joe's bug out bag for noobs, just a very beginning steps into the bug out bag. I do think that's important, whatever you want to call it. Kind of basic preparedness bag. So hopefully you're subscribed, and if not, maybe subscribe now. That way you'll get notified of that. And hopefully by God's grace it'll come out after this one, the bug out bag for noobs, or Average Joe's bug out bag. Now I pretty much did this in order of importance so far. However, I saved the best for last. The most important part. You probably know, if you've listened for any length of time, where I'm going with this. A Bible. You need to have a Bible. Martial, metallic weapons are good, but a far more crucial weapon is the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. You have a body, but you are a spiritual being that dwells in an earthly tent, a temporary dwelling. If you live 120 years and go to hell, you kind of failed, right? Fail. Game over, man. You failed. Providing and protecting on the earth is important. Providing and protecting spiritually and shepherding and bringing yourself and others to eternal life is more important. Have a Bible and know how to use it. Be acquainted with it. Read it. Pray to God and His one and only Son, Jesus Christ. I don't care what religion you think you are if you're listening to this. There's only one right one. And if you're not, then you are wrong. I don't apologize for saying that. Jesus very clearly says, no one comes to the Father except through me. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. Do you want to go to heaven? Do you want to go to hell? The only way is through Jesus Christ. You can disagree with that if you want, but you are wrong. And I don't sugarcoat that or apologize for that. Jesus Christ is the only way. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. All things were made by Him, and from Him, and to Him, and in Him all things consist. On that note, it seems like a lot of the stuff I went over today is tactical tips. I'm going to go to a tactical verse of the day. And there are many good ones that could be put in here. Proverbs 6. Go to the ant, you sluggard, and consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When will you get up from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief and scarcity like an armed man. With that, men, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day. So, who am I? Who is this person talking to you from across the internet? Why should you listen? First and foremost, I am a Christian, a servant of God, and a follower of Jesus Christ. God has blessed me to do many things in my life, for I could do nothing apart from Him. U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, did a couple of tours in Iraq. As an assaultman after my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. Also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also did several years in law enforcement, LAPD. I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency. That's all I'll say about that. Been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion. And West Coast Regional Rifle Champion. Won more shooting competitions with the talent that God's given me than I can actually remember. Was blessed to be the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. Our primary job, the reason we primarily existed, was to stop active shooters. I got the opportunity to head up and be the commander of that team. I grew up around guns, hunting and shooting, and competing at a very early age. Been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country, from whitetail on the east coast to mule deer on the west coast, and bear and elk and all manner of things. I've even been a professional big game hunter and guide. But again, most importantly, I'm a Christian. And I am your host, Michael Milito. If you listened through all that in the intro, especially if you've heard it before, I just wanted to say thank you. You can always check out more at Good Shepherd Training or become a patron. I wanted to give you something a little special at the end for listening through all that. Another verse. For with God, all things are possible. All things. Nothing is impossible to him. He made the heavens and the earth. He spoke them into existence. Every bit of matter, every atom, every tree, every mountain, everything that you see was made and is sustained by God. Whatever your problem, whatever your struggle, go to God. Nothing is impossible to him. With that, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.